"This house is mine at last," my sister announced in court. My parents cheered. I remained quiet, but the judge looked up and stated, "Wait, one of the dozen properties I see. I'd like to examine it." The cold fluorescent hum of the courtroom overhead was a stark contrast to the thrumming tension in my own chest, a low, constant vibration that mirrored the barely contained excitement radiating from my sister, Mallory, as she whispered urgently to her lawyer. Directly behind her, my mother, Constance, clutched her purse like it was the only thing tethering her to reality, while my father, Gerald, fussed repeatedly with his tie, a nervous habit I knew well. Not once had any of them met my gaze since we'd all shuffled in. I sat alone on my side of the room, my attorney, Vincent Parker, a man whose quiet competence was a balm to my frayed nerves, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of someone who understood every comma. We were here because the mediator, bless their optimistic heart, had failed to bridge a chasm that ran deeper than any property line. Mallory wanted the house, the one our grandmother Irene had left to both of us equally, and she'd somehow convinced our parents that her claim was not just valid, but righteous. It wasn't a mansion, not by any stretch, a perfectly decent 3-bedroom ranch built in the 70s, good bones, but fixtures decidedly past their prime. Grandma Irene, bless her generous soul, had probably hoped it would bring us closer, a shared legacy to navigate together. Instead, it had become a battleground. Mallory, ever pragmatic about her perceived needs, had immediately demanded I sign over my half, insisting it was essential for her growing family. When I'd simply refused, the refusal itself felt like an act of war, and she'd launched this legal offensive. My jaw was tight, almost locked, from the effort of holding back everything I wanted to say. Then, the sudden murmur of the room, followed by a collective standing as Judge Patricia Hoffman entered. She was a woman in her early 60s, steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun, reading glasses dangling from a chain around her neck. Her expression was less stern, more world-weary, like she'd witnessed every imaginable shade of human folly and found most of it utterly exhausting. "Please be seated." Her voice was clear, cutting through the lingering anticipation, as she settled into her chair, opening the case file with a decisive snap. "I've reviewed the preliminary documents. This is a dispute over inherited property between sisters. Ms. Mallory Chen is petitioning for sole ownership of the property located at 847 Elwood Drive, currently held jointly with her sister, Miss Natalie Chen." Brad Morrison, Mallory's lawyer, rose instantly, slick and polished in his expensive suit. "Your Honor, my client has 3 young children and desperately needs this family home. Her sister, Miss Chen, is single, with no dependents and owns other properties. It would be cruel to deny a mother the home she needs to raise her family." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother nod vigorously, a silent, damning affirmation. My father's arm went around her, a public display of solidarity that twisted something cold and hard in my stomach. The judge's gaze then shifted to me, a brief, assessing flicker. "Miss Chen, you're represented by Mr. Vincent Parker." Vincent stood, buttoning his jacket with a quiet grace. "Yes, Your Honor. My client has attempted multiple times to reach a fair compromise, including offering to buy out her sister's half at above market value. All offers have been rejected. Because the house is rightfully mine." Mallory burst out, half rising from her seat, her voice cracking with indignation. Her lawyer quickly placed a hand on her arm, but she shook it off, eyes blazing. "Our grandmother wanted me to have it. She told me so before she died." Judge Hoffman's expression remained utterly neutral, a mask of judicial impartiality. "If that were true, Miss Chen, your grandmother would have specified it in her will. She did not. She left the property to both of you equally." Mallory's face flushed a deep, angry red. "My sister doesn't even need it. She has plenty of money, plenty of other places to live. I'm the one with children who need a stable home. I'm the one who actually needs this house." The judge looked down at her papers, then back up at Mallory, her voice carrying a subtle, almost imperceptible edge. "According to the financial disclosures, you currently reside in a 4-bedroom home you own with your husband, Dr. Marcus Chen. Your children attend private school. Your household income exceeds $200,000 annually. Can you explain to me what constitutes desperate need in your situation? Mallory's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, a fish out of water. Brad Morrison smoothly stepped in. Your Honor, it's not just about immediate need. It's about family legacy, about keeping the home where my client spent her childhood, where her children can make memories with their grandmother's belongings. Miss Natalie Chin has shown no emotional attachment to this property. She's treated it as merely another asset in her portfolio. I felt Vincent shift beside me, preparing to respond, but Judge Hoffman held up a hand, her gaze now fixated on something in the file, her brow furrowed in concentration. She flipped back several pages, then forward again. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken question. Finally, she looked up, directly at me for the first time, a gaze that felt like it pierced right through me. Miss Natalie Chin, I'm looking at the property disclosure forms here. It lists the Elmwood Drive property as jointly owned with your sister, but there's a notation here about additional properties. Can you clarify? Vincent stood again, a faint note of surprise in his voice. Yes, Your Honor. My client owns several properties, all acquired through her own earnings and investments. None of them are relevant to this case, which concerns only the jointly inherited property. But Judge Hoffman was still studying the documents, her finger tracing down the page. It says here, 12 properties total. Is that accurate? My throat felt suddenly dry, but I managed to nod. Yes, Your Honor. Mallory let out a sharp, derisive laugh. See? She's basically a real estate mogul. She doesn't need Grandma's house. She has 10 other properties. But the judge wasn't looking at Mallory. Her attention was riveted on the list, her finger still tracing down the entries. When she reached the bottom, she went very still. A chill snaked down my spine. Then she looked up at me, her expression unreadable, a strange mix of recognition and something else I couldn't quite decipher. Miss Chin, one of these properties is listed as 1433 Riverside Court. Is that correct? My stomach plummeted, a cold, heavy stone. I nodded slowly, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. Can you tell me about that property? The judge's voice had subtly changed, becoming more careful, softer, yet infinitely more probing. Vincent glanced at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Every single person in that courtroom felt like they were staring a hole through me, but I kept my focus locked on the judge. It's a residential property I purchased 6 years ago. A 4-bedroom house in the Riverside district. Judge Hoffman slowly removed her reading glasses, placing them deliberately on her desk, her gaze never leaving mine. The same Riverside court where I lived for 15 years? Where my daughter grew up. Where I sold my house 6 years ago during my divorce because I couldn't afford to keep it. Her voice remained level, but something raw and vulnerable flickered in her eyes, quickly masked. The house my ex-husband and I built together. The house I had to leave because the mortgage was underwater after the market crash and I was drowning in legal fees. The courtroom had gone absolutely, terrifyingly silent. Mallory's smug expression had melted into utter confusion. My parents, for the first time, were actually looking at me, their faces blank with incomprehension. Your Honor, Vincent interjected carefully, I'm not sure I understand the relevance. The relevance, Mr. Parker, is that I'm very curious about this property. Judge Hoffman leaned forward, her voice regaining its judicial authority. Miss Chin, did you know the history of that house when you purchased it? I met her unwavering gaze. Yes, Your Honor. I did. How much did you pay for it? $75,000. The bank accepted it as a short sale. Mallory's lawyer started to object, but Judge Hoffman cut him off with a single, silencing look. Miss Chin, what is that property worth now? Approximately $450,000. The neighborhood has appreciated significantly. Judge Hoffman sat back, studying me, a deep thoughtfulness in her eyes. And what do you do with this property? Do you rent it out? This was the moment I had been dreading, the public unveiling of a deeply personal commitment. A cold sweat prickled my hairline. No, Your Honor. It's occupied by a tenant who pays minimal rent. Far below market rate. How much below market rate? Her voice was a soft insistence. She pays $300 a month. Market rate for a 4-bedroom in that area would be around $2,500. I heard my mother gasp, a sharp, choked sound from behind me. Mallory was staring at me like I'd suddenly grown a second head, her mouth slightly agape. Vincent, beside me, looked like he was trying to solve a puzzle, but missing half the pieces. Judge Hoffman's expression remained neutral, yet her voice, when she spoke again, was undeniably softer, laced with a fragile wonder. "And who is this tenant?" I took a steadying breath, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. "A woman named Patricia Hoffman. She's lived there for 6 years." The judge closed her eyes briefly, a tiny tremor passing through her. When she opened them, they were bright with something that might have been tears, but her voice stayed remarkably steady. "My daughter. You're renting my childhood home to my daughter for $300 a month." "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. "When the property went into foreclosure, I researched it," I explained, the words coming slowly, deliberately. "I found out that you'd lost it in a divorce, that you were a family court judge dealing with a difficult separation while trying to raise a teenager. Your daughter was in high school at the time. I saw her social media posts about how devastated she was to lose her home, so I bought it from the bank and offered her a lease at a price she could afford on her after-school job salary. The agreement was that she could stay as long as she wanted, that it would remain her home." Judge Hoffman pressed her lips together tightly, a single tear escaping the corner of her eye and tracing a path down her cheek. "You've been maintaining that property for 6 years at a significant loss." "Yes, Your Honor." "And you never told my daughter who owned it?" "No. She knows me as Natalie Martinez. I used my mother's maiden name for the property management company. I didn't want her to feel indebted or uncomfortable. I just wanted her to have her home back." The silence in the courtroom felt thick enough to touch, almost suffocating. Mallory had gone utterly pale, her earlier rage replaced by a stunned, vacant look. My father was staring intently at his hands, avoiding all eye contact. My mother looked like she was trying to process information that simply didn't fit into her long-held understanding of who I was. This is the thing about cognitive dissonance. When deeply held beliefs are confronted with undeniable evidence, the mind struggles to reconcile the two, often leading to discomfort, confusion, or even outright rejection of the new information. My parents were witnessing a daughter they believed they knew, revealing a facet of herself so contrary to their narrative, it was shaking their foundational assumptions. Judge Hoffman picked up her glasses and put them back on, her hands not quite steady. "Mr. Parker, may I ask why this wasn't mentioned in your opening statements?" Vincent, to his credit, recovered quickly, a slight smile playing on his lips. "My client is a private person, Your Honor. She doesn't believe her other properties or her personal choices are relevant to this case about a specific inherited property. She separates her business investments from her private charitable decisions." "Charitable," Judge Hoffman repeated quietly, a new weight to the word. She looked at the property list again, a flicker of suspicion returning to her eyes. "Are the other properties similar situations?" I wanted to sink through the floor, to become invisible. "Some of them, yes." "How many?" 8 of the 12 properties are occupied by tenants paying significantly below market rent. Most are people who lost their homes in foreclosures or difficult circumstances. I buy the properties from banks and offer long-term leases to the original families when possible." Mallory finally found her voice a raw, incredulous whisper. "That's insane. Do you know how much money you're losing? How stupid can you be?" Judge Hoffman's head snapped toward Mallory so fast it was almost frightening, her eyes blazing with an anger that was palpable. "Miss Mallory-Chen, you will not speak to your sister that way in my courtroom. In fact, let's discuss your petition. You want this court to force your sister to give you sole ownership of an inherited property because you, a woman living in a 4-bedroom home with a substantial income, need it more than she does. Meanwhile, your sister owns multiple properties that she uses to house families who have nowhere else to go, at enormous personal cost, asking nothing in return." Brad Morrison tried to interject, rising tentatively. "Your Honor, with respect, my client's need is legitimate. Your client's need is greed, Mr. Morrison." The judge's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. I've been on the bench for 20 years, and I've seen every variation of sibling disputes over inheritance. This case is particularly enlightening about character. She turned back to me, her voice softening slightly. Miss Natalie Chin, I need to recuse myself from this case. I have a clear conflict of interest, given that you own the property where my daughter lives. However, before I do, I want to make something absolutely clear for the record. Judge Hoffman looked directly at my parents for the first time, her gaze unwavering, filled with a profound disappointment. Mr. and Mrs. Chin, I don't know what your relationship with your daughters is like, or why you're supporting one over the other in this dispute. But I want you to understand what I see in this courtroom. I see one daughter who has spent years quietly helping people who bought my daughter's childhood home and gave it back to her when she had no way to keep it, who has shown more compassion to strangers than most people show their own families. And I see another daughter who wants to take from her sister simply because she believes she can. My mother's face had gone utterly white, her jaw slack. My father looked as though he might actually be sick. Your Honor, Brad Morrison stammered desperately. This is highly irregular. What's irregular, Mr. Morrison, is filing a frivolous lawsuit demanding that a court force someone to give up their inheritance because you think you deserve it more. What's irregular is parents who apparently don't know their own daughter well enough to understand what kind of person she is. Judge Hoffman stood, gathering her papers with a rustle. I'm recusing myself and requesting a different judge be assigned to this case, but I will be filing a recommendation that this petition be dismissed as without merit. Miss Mallory Chen has no legal grounds to demand sole ownership of a jointly inherited property, particularly when she has been offered fair market compensation and refused it. This appears to be a case of wanting to punish a sibling, not a legitimate property dispute. She paused at the doorway, her hand on the frame, looking back at me, a genuine warmth now in her eyes. Miss Chen, my daughter Patricia will be hearing from me tonight. I suspect she'll want to speak with you. Thank you for what you did. Thank you for giving her back her home when I couldn't. Then she was gone, and the courtroom erupted. Mallory was on her feet, shouting that this was unfair, that the judge was biased, that she'd appeal this to a higher court. Brad Morrison was trying to calm her down, looking like he wanted nothing more than to spontaneously combust and disappear. My parents sat frozen in their seats, staring at me as if I were a stranger, a ghost. Vincent put a gentle, steadying hand on my shoulder. Why didn't you tell me about the properties? His voice was low, laced with a wonder that felt almost foreign in that sterile room. Because it wasn't relevant, I said quietly, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. This case is about Grandma Irene's house, nothing else. It's relevant to character, Natalie. It's relevant to showing the court who you are. I shook my head. I don't want credit for doing what anyone should do. Those families needed homes. I had the money to help them. It's not complicated. He shook his head, a genuine smile now touching his lips. You're something else. You know that. Mallory's shouting had attracted a bailiff, who was now patiently explaining that she needed to leave the courtroom. She whirled on me as she passed, her face a mask of contorted rage. You think you're so much better than me. You think you're some kind of saint. You're just showing off, trying to make me look bad. I stood up, meeting her furious gaze. Mallory, I've never tried to make you look bad. You're doing that all by yourself. I offered to buy you out of the house at above market value. I offered to let you buy me out. I offered to sell it and split the proceeds. You refused every option because what you really wanted was for me to have nothing. You wanted to take from me just to prove that you could. You have 11 other properties, she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. 8 of which are occupied by families paying a fraction of market rent. I have 3 actual investment properties that generate income. Grandma's house would have been the 4th. I need that income, Mallory. I needed it to cover the properties where I'm losing money every month so those families can stay in their homes. My mother finally spoke, her voice small, fragile. You've been losing money for years? I turned to look at her, the exhaustion of years of silent sacrifice suddenly weighing on me. Yes, Mom. For 6 years, I've been covering mortgages and property taxes and maintenance on houses where the rent doesn't come close to covering costs. It's why I work so many hours. Why I took that second job last year. It's why I don't take vacations or buy new clothes or do any of the things Mallory thinks I'm doing with my money. My father cleared his throat, his eyes now filled with a deep, aching regret. Why didn't you tell us? The question was a low whisper, almost lost in the echoing chamber of the courtroom. Because every time I tried to talk to you about anything important, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, you cut me off to hear more about Mallory's kids or Mallory's new kitchen renovation or whatever Mallory wanted to talk about. When have you ever asked me what I was doing with my life? When have you ever been interested? The silence that followed was broken only by my mother's soft, ragged crying. My father put his arm around her, but he was looking at me, his face etched with something that might have been shame, or perhaps, for the very first time, genuine understanding. This moment highlighted the insidious nature of parental favoritism and its long-term psychological impact. Not only did Mallory internalize a sense of entitlement, but I, as the less favored child, learned to minimize my needs and achievements, to expect little attention, and to seek validation outside the family unit. The parents, caught in the pattern, were blinded by their own confirmation bias, only seeing what reinforced their existing narrative. It's a difficult pattern to break, causing deep-seated wounds on all sides. Vincent started packing up his briefcase. We'll wait to hear which judge gets assigned to the case, but given Judge Hoffman's recommendation, I don't think we have much to worry about. Mallory's petition will likely be dismissed, and we can pursue the partition sale we originally suggested. The partition sale, I knew, would force the house to be sold and the proceeds split evenly. Neither of us would get the house, but we'd each get our fair share of its value. It wasn't what I'd wanted, not the sentimental dream of keeping Grandma's house, but it was far better than watching Mallory get everything while I got nothing. Before we could leave, Brad Morrison approached Vincent, his expression tight, clearly deflated. We need to discuss a potential settlement. My client is willing to reconsider the buyout option. Vincent glanced at me, and I shook my head, a sense of quiet finality settling over me. That ship has sailed. Your client had multiple opportunities to accept fair offers. She chose litigation instead. We'll proceed with a partition sale. Brad's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Miss Chen, my client was simply trying to secure her family's future. Surely you can understand that as a fellow businesswoman. I understand that your client wanted something for nothing, I replied evenly, my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside me. She wanted me to hand over my inheritance because she felt entitled to it. That's not how the law works, and that's not how fairness works. Mallory suddenly appeared behind her lawyer, her face blotchy from crying angry tears. You just had to show off in there, didn't you? Had to make yourself look like some kind of hero while making me look like the villain. You planned this whole thing. I stared at her in disbelief, a short, sharp laugh escaping my lips. Planned what? Exactly? Planned for the judge to happen to be the mother of someone I helped years ago? Mallory, I didn't even know Judge Hoffman had a daughter until today. I certainly didn't know she was. The judge assigned to our case. You expect me to believe that? You probably researched all the judges, found out which one you could manipulate. That's enough. My father's voice, usually so mild, boomed through the quiet corridor. He stepped firmly between us, looking at Mallory with an expression I'd never seen before, something between profound disappointment and cold disgust. Mallory, stop. Just stop. Your sister didn't manipulate anyone. She's been quietly helping people for years while asking for nothing in return. Meanwhile, you're trying to steal her inheritance. Can you hear yourself right now? Mallory's mouth fell open, utterly stunned. Dad, you're supposed to be on my side. I'm not on anyone's side anymore, he said, his voice raw with pain. I'm trying to see the truth. And the truth is that we raised you to think the world owes you everything while teaching your sister that she deserves nothing. We failed both of you, but in very different ways. My mother touched Mallory's arm gently, her voice wavering. Honey, maybe it's time to let this go. The house isn't worth destroying what's left of this family. Mallory jerked away from her, her eyes wild. What family? There is no family. There's just Natalie the saint and everyone worshipping at her feet. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, Brad Morrison hurrying after her, apologizing into his phone as he went. The hallway felt cavernous in the silence she left behind. My mother looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. "She'll calm down eventually." "She always does." "Maybe," I said, my voice flat. "Or maybe she won't." Either way, I'm done trying to make peace with someone who sees me as the enemy. Vincent checked his watch. "I need to get to another appointment, but Natalie, call me if anything comes up. Otherwise, I'll be in touch about the sale proceedings." He nodded to my parents, a quick, polite gesture, and left, his footsteps echoing down the marble corridor. My father cleared his throat again, a nervous sound. "Your grandmother would have been proud of you today. Not because of how the hearing went, but because of who you've become. She always said you had the biggest heart of anyone she knew." The mention of Grandma Irene made my chest ache, a sharp, unexpected ping. She left the house to both of us because she believed we could work it out fairly. She believed we were both good people who cared about each other. I guess she was wrong about that. "She wasn't wrong about you," my mother said softly, her voice still thick with tears. "She saw exactly who you were. We're the ones who were blind." As we left the courtroom, I could still hear Mallory arguing with her lawyer somewhere down the hall, her angry voice fading. My parents followed me out, maintaining a careful distance, as if unsure whether they were allowed to approach. "Natalie," my father called, his voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" I stopped, but didn't turn around. "What do you want to talk about, Dad?" "We didn't know," my mother said, her voice catching. "We didn't know you were doing all of this, helping all these people, losing money to help strangers. Would it have mattered if you knew?" The question hung in the cold, cavernous air, heavy with years of unspoken resentment and neglect. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again, no words coming out. What could he say? They'd spent years making it undeniably clear that Mallory was their priority, their favorite, the daughter who mattered most. I'd learned to accept it a long time ago, a bitter pill swallowed in childhood. Vincent touched my elbow gently. "I'll call you when I hear about the new judge. Go home, Natalie. Get some rest. This part is over." I nodded, a wave of profound weariness washing over me, and headed for the exit, the cold marble feeling slick beneath my feet. Behind me, I heard my mother sob and my father trying to comfort her. Part of me, a small, forgotten part, felt a flicker of guilt for making them cry. The larger part, the part that had built a life on its own terms, felt nothing at all. You can't mourn a relationship you never truly had. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. 12 were from my parents. 3 were from Mallory. 2 were from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored all of them, the phone buzzing angrily on my nightstand, and instead made coffee, the rich aroma a welcome distraction. Sitting at my kitchen table, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Vincent. "New judge assigned. Hearing scheduled for next month. Judge Hoffman's recommendation filed. Looking good." Another text came through immediately after. This one from an unknown number. "Miss Chin, this is Patricia Hoffman. My mom gave me your number. Can we please talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, the words blurring slightly. This was the part I'd been dreading, the inevitable reckoning. Patricia had lived in that house for 6 years, believing her landlord was a property management company called Martinez Properties. She'd never known that the owner was someone who'd specifically bought the house to give it back to her. Now she knew, and that changed everything. I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly, of course. "When works for you?" Her response was immediate, a burst of eagerness. "Today? Anytime today? Please, I need to understand." We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Patricia was 24 now, a recent college graduate working as a graphic designer, her hair a vibrant auburn. She looked so much like her mother, with the same sharp intelligence in her eyes and the same direct, no-nonsense way of speaking. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of her. She stood when she saw me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, 2 strangers bound by a secret act of kindness. "I didn't know what you liked, so I got you a latte," she said finally, her voice a little shaky. If you don't like it, we can get you something else. A latte is perfect. Thank you. We sat down, the small talk feeling painfully awkward. Patricia wrapped her hands around her cup, but didn't drink. My mom cried for 3 hours last night. I've never seen her cry like that. She told me everything about the divorce, about losing the house, about how she felt like she'd failed me. Then she told me what you did. I started to protest, to offer some explanation, but she held up a hand. Patricia, no, please let me finish. She took a shaky breath, her eyes brimming. Do you know what that house means to me? I learned to ride a bike in that driveway. My dad and I planted that oak tree in the backyard when I was 8. My mom and I painted my bedroom purple together before high school. Every important memory of my childhood happened in that house. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, her voice raw with emotion. When we lost it, I felt like I'd lost my entire life. Everything familiar and safe just vanished. My parents were getting divorced. My mom was barely holding it together, and our home was gone. I was 17, and I felt like my whole world had ended. I know, I said softly, a lump forming in my own throat. I read your blog posts from that time. That's how I knew how much it mattered to you. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, a flash of her teenage self. You read my teenage angst blog? I did. And I saw how much you loved the house, how much losing. It hurt you. When I saw it was going into foreclosure, I couldn't stand the thought of it going to some investor who'd flip it or tear it down. So I bought it. And then I found you and offered you a lease for $300 a month. I thought I was getting the deal of a lifetime from a property management company that felt sorry for me. Patricia shook her head, tears now freely flowing down her cheeks. I've been living in my childhood home for 6 years, paying basically nothing, never knowing that someone had bought it specifically to give it back to me. Do you understand how insane that is? I understand that it was important to me that you had your home back. But why? You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. Why would you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a stranger? I considered how to explain it, the words catching in my throat. When I was 9 years old, my family lost our house in a fire. We were renting at the time, and we didn't have good insurance. We lost everything and had to move into my grandmother's basement. My parents were devastated, and I remember feeling so scared and untethered. Like if I didn't have my home, I didn't know who I was anymore. Patricia was listening intently, her coffee forgotten, her gaze fixed on mine. We eventually got back on our feet, but I never forgot what that felt like. That sensation of having the ground pulled out from under you. When I grew up and started making money, I decided I wanted to help people keep their homes, or get them back if possible. You weren't the first family I helped, and you won't be the last. My mom said you have 8 properties where you're doing this. Losing money every month to help people you don't even know. I shrugged, a small, self-conscious gesture. I make enough from my actual investment properties and my job to cover it. I live modestly. I don't need much. It's worth it to know that families have stable housing. Patricia wiped her eyes with her napkin, a shaky smile touching her lips. I graduate debt-free next month because I could afford college while paying only $300 in rent. I have savings. I have a career starting. I have my life together because you gave me back my home and charged me almost nothing to live there. Do you understand what that means? I'm glad it helped. Helped? Natalie, you changed the entire trajectory of my life. You gave me stability when everything was falling apart. You let me keep my home, my memories, my sense of who I am. You did this asking for nothing in return, not even recognition. How do I even begin to thank you for something like that? I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, a warmth spreading through me. You already have. Knowing that the house meant as much to you as I thought it did, knowing that it helped you build a good life, that's all the thanks I need. We talked for 2 more hours. Patricia told me about college, about her design work, about her mother's career, and how proud she was of her. She told me about the oak tree in the backyard that had grown tall and strong, about the purple bedroom she'd finally repainted a more adult shade of gray, about the memories she'd continued to make in that house over the past 6 years. When our coffee cups were empty, she pulled out her phone and showed me photos of the house. The living room where we'd replaced the old carpet with hardwood floors. The kitchen where I'd updated the appliances after the refrigerator died in year 3. The backyard where that oak tree now provided shade over half the lawn. "I've been taking care of it like it was mine," she said, scrolling through the pictures, her voice full of affection. "Because it felt like mine, you know. I painted the shutters last summer. Fixed the fence after that storm. Planted a garden along the side of the house. I treated it like a home, not just a rental." "I know," I said, genuinely impressed. The property manager sent me reports. "You've been an ideal tenant. Better than ideal, actually. You've improved the property significantly." She looked up from her phone, her eyes suddenly serious. "Did you ever think about selling it? The neighborhood's gotten really desirable. You could make a fortune if you sold now." "The thought never crossed my mind," I admitted. "I bought it for you, Patricia. It was always meant to be yours for as long as you wanted it." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of profound gratitude, not pain. What if I want to buy it? What if I want to own it properly, not just rent it? I hadn't expected that question, my heart doing a little leap. "You'd want to buy it?" "It's my home, Natalie. It's been my home my whole life, and you gave it back to me when I thought I'd lost it forever. Of course, I want to own it. I want it to actually be mine. Legally mine. I want to know that nobody can ever take it away from me again." We discussed numbers. The property was worth around $450,000 on the current market. Patricia had some savings, but nowhere near enough for a down payment on that price. I offered to sell it to her for what I'd paid 6 years ago, $75,000, but she refused, shaking her head vehemently. "That's not fair to you. You've lost so much money already maintaining it and charging me almost nothing in rent. I won't let you lose even more by selling it for a fraction of what it's worth." We compromised. I would sell her the house for $200,000, well below market value, but enough that I wouldn't take a massive loss. She would have 5 years to save for a down payment, and in the meantime, the rent would stay at $300 a month. When she was ready, we'd make the sale official. "I'm going to work extra freelance projects," she said, her voice filled with determined resolve. "I'm going to save every penny I can. In 5 years, I'll buy this house from you properly, and you'll finally stop losing money on it." "Patricia, there's no rush." "There is for me. You've done enough. More than enough. It's time I stood on my own feet and took real ownership of my life, starting with my home. I want to start paying market rent," she added finally, her chin set stubbornly. "It's not right that I'm paying so little when I can afford more now." I shook my head, a gentle smile spreading across my face. "The lease agreement stands. $300 a month for as long as you want to stay there. But Patricia, this isn't about money. It never was. If you want to do something with your extra income, donate it to a housing charity. Help another family, but the rent on your house stays the same." She started crying again, a mixture of frustration and overwhelming emotion, and I handed her more napkins. "You're impossible," she choked out through her tears. "So I've been told." When we finally said goodbye, Patricia hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. I mean it. You gave me everything. The least I can do is be here for you." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months, a profound sense of peace settling over me. Whatever happened with Mallory in the court case, this conversation, this connection, had made it all worthwhile. The following week, my parents showed up at my door unannounced. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but my car was in the driveway, and they'd clearly seen me through the window. I let them in reluctantly, a familiar tightness returning to my chest. My mother looked like she'd aged years in a week, her eyes shadowed, her usually neat hair a little disheveled. My father's shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen before, carrying a visible weight. They sat on my couch like strangers in an unfamiliar house, which I suppose they were. They'd never been to my place before. I'd never invited them. "Natalie, we owe you an apology," my father began, his voice hoarse, raw with emotion. "A huge one. We've been terrible parents to you." I didn't argue. What would be the point? My mother twisted her hands in her lap, her eyes fixed on some distant point. "We didn't know what you were doing with your life. We didn't know about the properties, about the families you were helping. We didn't know anything because we never bothered to ask. We just assumed. Her voice broke. We assumed you were fine. That you didn't need us the way Mallory did. Mallory never needed you, I said quietly, the words dropping like small, hard pebbles. She just demanded more attention, and you gave it to her. There's a difference. My father flinched, a visible wince. You're right. We know you're right. Mallory has always been louder, more dramatic, more insistent. It was easier to focus on her because she made such a fuss if we didn't. You were always so independent, so capable. We told ourselves you didn't need us. I did need you. I just learned not to expect anything. The words landed like stones, heavy and cold. My mother started crying in earnest now, big, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. My father put his arm around her, but his eyes never left my face, filled with a desperate, pleading hope. We can't undo the past, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We can't take back the years of neglect, of favoring your sister, of failing to see who you really are. But we want to try to do better. We want to have a relationship with you if you let us. I looked at them both, these people who'd given me life but had never really known me. Part of me, the deeply wounded child, wanted to tell them it was too late, that they'd burned that bridge too thoroughly to ever rebuild. But another part, a smaller and more hopeful part, remembered being a little girl who just wanted her parents to notice her, to see her. It's a delicate dance, this rebuilding of fractured relationships, often complicated by the deeply ingrained dynamics of family systems theory, where each member plays a role that is resistant to change. The challenge isn't just forgiveness, but fundamentally altering decades of learned behavior and expectations. I'll think about it, I said finally, the words feeling foreign, tentative. But I'm not making any promises. You both hurt me deeply for a very long time. I'm not sure that's something we can fix with a conversation and an apology. My mother nodded through her tears, her face crumpled. We understand. We'll do whatever it takes, Natalie. Whatever you need from us. They left shortly after, and I sat alone in my living room, the silence amplified by their departure, wondering if people could really change, if relationships could truly be rebuilt from rubble. I honestly didn't know. The court hearing a month later was anticlimactic. The new judge, a stern woman named Judge Rebecca Martinez, reviewed the case and dismissed Mallory's petition within 15 minutes. She ordered the property to be sold and the proceeds divided equally between us, exactly as I'd originally suggested. Mallory didn't even show up to the hearing. Brad Morrison appeared alone, looking noticeably relieved to have the case over with. Vincent and I shook hands outside the courthouse, and he told me he was glad to have represented me. You're a good person, Natalie Chin, he said, his smile genuine. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The house sold 3 weeks later for $20,000 over asking price. Mallory got her half of the money and immediately used it as a down payment on a vacation property in the mountains. I put my half into an account I'd set up for property maintenance and repairs on the houses where I was helping families. My parents tried to stay in touch, calling once a week and inviting me to Sunday dinners. I went occasionally, testing the waters, seeing if they could sustain this new, tentative interest in my life. It was awkward and uncomfortable, steeped in years of unspoken history, but they were trying. That had to count for something. Mallory stopped speaking to me entirely, which, honestly, came as a relief. I was tired of fighting with someone who had never cared about me anyway. She sent our parents long, vitriolic emails about what a terrible sister I was, how I'd stolen her inheritance, how I'd manipulated the judge. They forwarded them to me with apologies, and I deleted them without reading past the first few lines. Her version of reality had nothing to do with mine. 6 months after the court case, Patricia called me with news, her voice bubbling with excitement. I got offered a job in New York. Amazing company, dream position, everything I've wanted, but I'd have to move. My heart sank a little, a familiar pang of loss, but I kept my voice steady. That's wonderful, Patricia. You should absolutely take it. The thing is, she continued, I don't want to leave the house sitting empty. I was thinking maybe you could find another family who needs it. Someone in a situation like mine was. I smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through my chest. I already have someone in mind. A single mother with 2 kids who just lost her house to foreclosure. She's been staying in a shelter. Perfect, Patricia declared, her enthusiasm infectious. Give her the same lease I had. $300 a month. Stable home. Fresh start. Patricia, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. Let me help give someone else the same chance. We can pay forward what you started. So that's what we did. The single mother, a woman named Andrea Marshall, moved into the Riverside courthouse with her 2 children. She cried when I showed her the lease terms, her hands trembling as she held the papers. Her kids, wide-eyed and full of nervous energy, ran through the rooms, picking out their bedrooms, already making it home. Life continued. I kept working my job, managing my properties, helping families stay in their homes. My parents and I built a careful, tentative relationship that might never be close, but was at least honest, built on a fragile foundation of rediscovered truth. Mallory stayed angry and distant, which was fine by me. The house sale went through without complications. Mallory got her check and bought her mountain vacation property. I never saw photos of it. Never heard about it except through my mother's carefully neutral updates. Mallory had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me, and I respected that boundary, even as it sometimes stung. 3 months after the sale, I got a letter from Mallory's lawyer. My stomach dropped when I saw the return address, certain she was suing me for something else, another battle to be fought. Instead, the letter contained a single page, a quick claim deed for a small property I didn't recognize the address of. I called Vincent immediately. Did Mallory just give me a property? He was quiet for a moment, his fingers clicking as he looked up the address. It's a small commercial space in the downtown area. According to county records, it was owned by her grandmother before she died. Looks like it was part of the estate, but got tied up in probate separately from the house. The paperwork just cleared. Why would Mallory give it to me? The note here says, "Grandmother clearly wanted you to have everything." I don't want anything from that woman's estate anymore. It's signed by Mallory. I sat down heavily, the paper rustling in my hand. The property turned out to be a small storefront that Grandma Irene had owned for decades, renting it to various small businesses over the years. The current tenant was a bookstore owner named Margaret, who had been there for 15 years, paying rent that hadn't increased since 2010. When I visited the property, Margaret greeted me nervously, a tremor in her voice. "Are you the new owner?" I heard Mrs. Irene passed. "I'm so sorry for your loss." She was a wonderful landlady. The bookstore was cramped but charming, filled floor to ceiling with used books and vintage editions. Margaret had clearly poured her heart into the place, creating cozy reading nooks and hosting community book clubs. "How much is your current rent?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She named a figure that was probably a third of what the space was worth in the current market. Mrs. Irene never raised it much. She said she'd rather have a good tenant who loved books than make more money renting to a chain store, but I understand if you need to increase it now. I'll do my best to manage. I thought about Grandma Irene, about the quiet legacy she'd left me that had nothing to do with property values and everything to do with community. "Your rent stays the same, Margaret," I said, a soft smile on my face. My grandmother had the right idea about good tenants. Her relief was palpable, her eyes welling up. "Thank you. Thank you so much. There aren't many landlords like you and Mrs. Irene anymore." As I left the bookstore, a profound understanding settled over me about why Mallory had given me the property. It wasn't a peace offering. It was her final, definitive rejection of everything our grandmother had stood for. Taking care of people, valuing relationships over profit, building community instead of just building wealth. Mallory wanted nothing to do with those values, so she wanted nothing to do with Grandma Irene's legacy. And that, I realized, was fine. I'd carry it for both of us. Judge Patricia Hoffman sent me a card on the 1-year anniversary of the court case. Inside, she'd written, in elegant script, "Thank you for showing me that integrity and compassion still exist in this world. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Your grandmother would be proud." I kept that card on my refrigerator, a quiet, constant reminder that doing the right thing doesn't always get recognized or rewarded immediately. Sometimes it gets you dragged into court by your own sister while your parents cheer her on. Sometimes it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of family conflict. But sometimes, just sometimes, it means a young woman gets to keep her childhood home, forging a future built on stability. It means a single mother and her kids have a safe place to sleep at night, a fresh start. It means families who've lost everything get one more chance to rebuild their lives. And in the end, that's worth more than any inheritance, any family approval, any legal victory. That's worth everything. How do we truly define inheritance? Is it the material possessions we receive, or the values and impact we choose to carry forward?